guy the respect he deserves, because I was just a super fan of Sid growing up. I was a fan of his when I'm like in my like preteens and then in my teenage years. And I didn't really like get into after today's show, I want us to retire this term, because if I never hear this fucking term in my life, I will be so happy. I don't want to hear it again. We got to retire it. Work rate. It's the dumbest fucking term. I cannot stand it. But he was not a work rate guy. That's the last time I'm going to say that stupid term. But that wasn't. So I think he took a lot of shit for that in the 90s, because he wasn't, Steamboat and Flair and Shawn Michaels and those guys and Bret Hart. At a time but he was over everywhere he went, and I was just so fascinated by the guy. Like, everybody makes fun of his promos. I loved his promos. He was absolutely intriguing. I don't care that he didn't make sense. That was part of the art of Sid's promos, is that, yeah, he's whacked, right? Like, that is exactly what he was supposed to be doing. He was money when he did it. I thought the guy was fantastic. He died earlier this week of cancer. Go to Patreon. I put it on the free tier. I actually did I pinned a tribute to him earlier this week, so I hope everybody gets a chance to read that and check it out. But yeah, Sycho, Sid Vicious, Sid Justice passed away earlier this week.
I think you and I are outliers here around here, because, like, as much as we love the quote unquote work rate guys, I think we can also appreciate wrestling for what it was in its era, right? And Sid wasn't a work rate guy. He was also 6'8", 300 pounds, jacked to the gills, and had hair like a bowl of ramen. Like, yeah. On top of being remarkably charismatic, what sets Sid apart from every other big guy that tried and failed was his personality.
Yeah.
Like, there was just something about Sid that worked, right? And like, everywhere he went, like you said, he got over. The first program I remember watching as a wrestling fan is 91. It was SummerSlam. I was very casual at the time. Like, I was just getting introduced. It was that summer of 91 going into SummerSlam, right? And it was Hogan and Warrior versus the Triangle of Terror. And I remember thinking, wow, Sid Justice is going to be the referee. Who the hell is Sid Justice?
Yeah.
I mean, like, and then I saw him and I was like, oh my God, he looks like a comic book character, a big comic book guy. I'm like, he looks like a comic book character. Like, Hogan was always kind of soft and like, he just never had the cut. Like, Hogan was big and buff, but then didn't have the cut. Sid was freaking cut. Like, Sid looked like $1 million. And there was just something about him. You talk about his promos. I remember this one time he was at center stage in WCW 93 during the second Sid Vicious run. During his entrance music, he was walking down the ring. He looked, because in WCW, guys would cut promos on the wild mic they would just look at the camera and cut promos, right? This would really separate WCW from WWF in that era. I remember he goes, and they ask me, Sid, why are you so evil? And he paused and he goes, because I love it. It makes no sense. But God, did I think it was the coolest thing in the world. And he went and just murdered a job guy. Like, and I'll say job guy. Care. Like,
don't use the J word too much, okay? We don't want to get kicked off the air.
I don't care. Like, I thought Sid was great. I didn't care that he didn't have great matches. Like, he wasn't supposed to. I didn't watch Sid because I thought he was going to have an excellent match. That's why I loved Steamboat. Like, I watched Sid because he was going to do something crazy.
What I think people need to realize that we don't need everybody to slap the leg and kick out of a bunch of stuff and go 35 minutes and have a high paced match. Like, we need a little bit of everything. We need those. I like my big wrestlers to be big wrestlers. That doesn't mean they're not good athletes. They're playing a role of a big ass badass monster, and that's what Sid did. But I will, to his credit, and I actually, because I'm very fond of his 1996 run in WWF. It was right before the Attitude Era. I just was just a big fan of his. And so I didn't watch the Shawn Michaels match from Survivor Series. I think I'll probably just check that out later this week, because I do remember loving that match. I love his entrance. Probably that's the thing I remember the most about it. I remember him smashing Jose Lothario with a camera, and then him just being like super over to the Madison Square Garden, and he was the heel, and he got over as a babyface, and Vince was obviously pissed about it. But I just remember his Bret Hart matches, because I was a big fan of Bret Hart, and I was a big fan of Sid. So watching Sid and Bret Hart, I just remember back on those matches fondly. I actually watched 2 of them the other night, and I was like, obviously Bret Hart is going to get a lot of credit for those matches, but it wasn't like Sid was bad in the matches. Like Sid was everywhere he was supposed to be. He looked great, and he knew when to turn it on. He knew when to be the monster, and he knew when to sell for Bret, and like he sold for Bret, and it was believable. Like Bret is getting him in submission holds, and Sid is selling, and it looked great. I'm not going to sit here and say that he was a classic worker and a technician, but he could, when he wanted to, be a little bit of a better worker than he was being presented on TV. But he was playing a role. His role wasn't to be the master technician. His role was to be the big ass psychotic monster. But he played it very well. And like the moment he came through the curtain, he captivated every audience he was in front of, and it didn't matter the promotion. Your eyes were glued to that guy, and you really wanted to know what he had to say and whose ass he was going to kick.
Couldn't take your eyes off the guy. The moment he showed up anywhere. Like, it's so funny, the skyscrapers, he just so overshadowed Dan Spivey. Like, it wasn't even
he
funny.
did.
Like, and it was from go. People were like, oh, that guy's awesome. Right. And Dan Spivey, really didn't. It's too bad, because I really think when Spivey kind of found himself as a talker was at the very end as Waylon Mercy, and he really never had a chance to go anywhere with that. That might have actually, in that era, might have actually done something. But Sid just so outshined him, right? And I know, like, Sid's job wasn't like, okay, I'm trying to think about how to make this good comparison. Like, everyone has a role to play. Like, if you're watching football, like, your offensive lineman cannot play quarterback. Your quarterback cannot play on the offensive line, right? But both parts are necessary to have a good football team, right? Not everybody should be a 6'1", a 6 foot tall, 5'11", muscled up work rate guy, or semi muscled up work rate guy. Not everybody can be Bret Hart. If everybody's Bret Hart isn't special. If everybody's Sid Vicious, Bret Hart isn't special. You know what I'm saying? Like, you need to have those, and I hate to use the MJF thing, the flavors of ice cream. I think it works better when you're talking about characters as opposed to, bad matches. Yeah. But like Sid, there was just something different about the guy. And the problem, and I don't care if he wasn't the best worker, I don't care if he wasn't a great draw either. What Sid was he was a compelling television character. Right. And there's value to that. And I don't care. I don't care that he didn't sell out arenas across the country. Like, it doesn't matter to me. I still enjoyed watching him on TV. He was still good at what he was supposed to do, which was, again, he never really had a chance to be the guy in any promotion. Like, even when he was the WWF champion, was he the guy? Like, was he like the guy in the company?
I think early on he did get a chance to be the guy, but I think they found that he wasn't reliable.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's the thing too with Sid, is he wasn't reliable.
Yeah.
Right. They might have wanted him to be the guy, but he wasn't capable of it.
Yeah.
And nor should he have been.
Right. So I think so. If you go back, and I'm going to get into a little bit of his history, and I know a lot of you are going to be able to read his obituary. I'm sure Dave's going to do something for him next week. I know Joe and Rich are probably going to do like a good hour on him tonight. But I think JD and I have probably a little bit of a different perspective of our appreciation for him. But I think if you go back in that 1990 to 1991 era, WCW, before he went to the WWF, they were about to give him a ton of money because they did not want him to leave. I think had he accepted that, maybe at that point in time, WCW would have tried to run with him, because I do think that they saw it in him. At that point, he'd already been in like main event matches as a heel, and I think maybe they would have probably went with him. But he comes over to WWF because I think they wanted him to be the next Hulk Hogan, because Hulk was getting ready to wind down a little bit. They had the steroid trial looming, and they looked at him as possibly taking over for Hulk Hogan, but they immediately flipped him heel, and nobody wanted to do business at WrestleMania 8. And the next thing you know, he's out of there. He just didn't last very long. But I think everybody wanted him to be the guy. They just felt like he just was an unreliable dude.
Well, it's funny because he's given that role because Warrior failed, right?
Yeah.
In 90, the box office went down. Warrior proved to be unreliable. The very same show that Sid makes his debut is when he basically holds Vince up for the money. Bix and Chris just did a really nice deep dive on that a couple weeks ago in Between the Sheets. And like, the Hogan role was hard. Like, it wasn't like people had this idea that Vince was like gun-ho Hogan the whole time. Like, he was always trying to look for the guy to replace Hogan. He just couldn't, because Hogan, say what you want about Hulk Hogan, don't love the man, but he was a big draw. He's the most
He was,
successful draw of his era, and you can't
yeah.
argue. And
He is one of the most special talents ever in the
was.
business. And I know nobody wants to say, and I get it. He sucks as a human. I get
Yeah.
that. But he was like, it took them a long time to replace Hulk Hogan, right? Because they tried it with Warrior, failed. I think they were gonna try it with Sid, but they just didn't think that he was reliable. And then they went to smaller guys during the steroid trial. They really never replaced Hogan until Stone Cold.
They tried with Luger too. They wanted to make Luger.
Yeah.
Which is funny because Sid probably does. So in '91, when Flair bounces, because Flair bounced shortly after Sid.
Yeah.
If Sid doesn't go and Flair bounces anyway, do they go with Sid over Luger, or do they just stick with the plan and go with Luger? I don't know. That's interesting to me.
I think they would have had two options there. I think that they could have headlined with Sid versus Luger.
Some we didn't see.
Yeah, because both of them could do heel or babyface. And I think that's one thing that gets lost on people. I know Sid played a heel most of his career, but there were times where he actually was a babyface. They tried to make him babyface several times.
Survivor Series 96, he is a babyface, and he walks out that curtain at Madison Square Garden, and he's a smart man. Like, he was smart. He knew right away that they want me. So he's fist bumping the crowd. It's and he feels it. Like, I knew Vince was probably pissed off, but I mean, like, they're smart. I'm sure he did. But I mean, like, Sid, which is funny because you figure Sid would be what Vince would like, but Vince loved Shawn. Like, Sid was Sid. But I mean, like, Sid felt that. And again, I used to love watching Sid fist bump the crowd and just like totally eat it up. Like, Sid was an underrated babyface. And we were gonna get a Sid babyface run in WCW 93 before he stabbed Arn Anderson.
Yeah, because he'd worked Sting at Halloween Havoc in 93, right? And then, and then they flipped him babyface. He's supposed to headline Starrcade against Vader, and I don't know that he was going to win the title against Vader, but I think Vader ended up losing it to Flair as the replacement. So who knows if they would have went with Sid?
Which was
depends on who you talk to.
That was the right move and the better story. The story of Starrcade 93 is actually one of my favorite WCW angles. We should actually do a deep dive on that come Starrcade time, because that's an event we haven't talked about. So I think that wound up working out better, and it certainly was a better match than Sid and Vader. Probably, although Vader was a really good big guy worker, he probably could have carried Sid to a good match.
Yeah,
but like that 93 Sid run is an interesting run because WCW, they have like stars there, but they just can't get their ducks in a row, like creatively speaking, and like the promotion is just kind of snake bit on stuff. It's weird. Like, they have like this Hall of Fame lineup in 93, but nothing clicks.
Yeah, because it was I think Bill Watts came in 92.
Dude, Bill Watts is out by early 93. It's Bischoff. This is Bischoff and Ole.
So it wasn't, when was Kip Fry was right after Bill Watts. So Kip Fry had some time in 93, right?
Kip Fry was before Bill Watts.
Got you. Okay.
Kip Fry signed all the big money deals. Watts came in, tried to cut him. Then the Madden interview was unleashed. Watts gets fired in January 93. Bischoff is hired in February 93. And then I think it's Ole. I think Ole books early on, and then I think Dusty's back.
Yeah.
In the latter half of 93.
Yeah, because at some point you can tell Dusty's fingerprints are all over it on some point, because
he's wrestling again.
Yeah, he's wrestling again. He's with his son, which his son was great, obviously. And but then they're doing all these skits, like these really over the top movie style skits. So yeah, especially with Vader and Sid at the beach and like trying to kill Davey Boy Smith on a boat. It's Davey Boy and Sting.
Oh my God, with the little midget, little person Cheatham.
Yeah.
I had to use the M word. My bad. It's wrestling. Don't we actually call them that in wrestling?
Yeah.
Minis. And the bomb blows up on the boat, and you're like, oh my God, Sting and Davey Boy are dead.
Yeah.
Oh no,
but no, they dove in the ocean, and the ocean protected them from the explosions, which is what happens.
God, I love wrestling, and I love Sid. Sid Justice, Sid Vicious, Psycho Sid, whatever you want to call him. He entertained the shit. I mean, he also had the most gruesome leg injury this side of Joe Theismann that any human beings ever looked at. Yeah,
man, and that essentially spelled the end of his career. He did a couple of indie matches after that, but and he came back in 2012 and did a Raw match with Heath Slater. But so I do have some notes here just to run through some of them. So one thing that I learned this week, and I didn't know this, he was actually discovered by Macho Man in Memphis and was trained by Tojo Yamamoto.
That I knew.
Yeah, which is pretty cool. And then he bounces around the Indies for a little bit. He ends up going to Japan and wrestling Fujinami, and then he goes to a World Class, and that's where he picks up the name Sid Vicious, named after obviously the Sex Pistols bassist who died in the set. He died in what, 70 something, right?
78, 79. I'm not a big punk rock guy. I don't know enough about punk rock history.
Okay, but it was him and Johnny Rotten and
Sex Pistols,
Sex Pistols. But then he ends up getting signed by WCW in 1989, and he formed the tag team of the Skyscrapers with Danny Spivey. And they basically saw it, like you had mentioned earlier. They saw it in him immediately. And if you go back to watch Halloween Havoc '89, and when the Skyscrapers come out, like Sid just steals every scene that he's in. The guy was just had an incredible presence. Some guys just have it, and Sid just had it like from day one.
And then there's the magnetic personality. You could tell they believed him because they put him in the Horsemen.
Yeah.
When Sting gets hurt and they're kind of shuffling through Horsemen, Sid, which is an odd call at the time, but it makes, it kind of makes sense when you're looking for guys. God, he almost I think it's Wrestle War 90 or no, 91. I forget if it's 91 where he almost kills Brian Pillman. Because remember, the War Games cage has the lid, and it wasn't like now where those lids are super high. Like those lids are probably only 8 or 9 feet up, and Sid power bombs Pillman, and Pillman's head just smashes into the cage, and Sid tries to do it again, and Pillman just sandbags him like, "No, you're gonna kill me, no."
Yeah, he was actually out of action for a little bit.
Yeah, he tried. Pillman, he almost killed Pillman legitimately.
Yeah, so they broke up the Skyscrapers. He joins the Horsemen, and then Mean Mark Callis takes his place in the Skyscrapers, but that didn't really last very long. Mean Mark obviously is the Undertaker.
Yeah, that worked out pretty good for him too. So again, Danny Spivey overshadowed. Although I don't know if anybody's thought of Mean Mark as overshadowing anybody at that time.
Yeah, no, Mean Mark was basically a geek. But yeah, he joins the Four Horsemen in 1990. And then you could tell, once they put him in the Horsemen, he's with all the top guys at that point, and they know that he has it, and I think he's getting ready for a big push as a headline guy. In 1990, didn't he headline with Sting and Halloween Havoc?
Halloween Havoc 1990 in Chicago. They have a decent match actually. It's actually probably the highlight of Sting's run as NWA champ is that little that little program and match, which is kind of fun until they completely botched the ending.
Well, nobody thinks of that as a good match because of the ending. Why don't you tell everybody what happens?
So it's a good match actually from two guys who were kind of relatively on the inexperienced side. Sting had only been a pro for 4 or 5 years. Sid had been a pro for 3 years at this time. So these are guys that are, in the grand scheme of wrestling, pretty green still, are headlining a pay-per-view. It's a pretty good show. Starcade, that's another one we should look at. Not Starcade, Havoc 90, right? It's also got Stan Hansen and Lex Luger. The Steiners have a great match with the Nasty Boys. Good show. So anyway, Sid and Sting are wrestling. Sting disappears and then comes back out, but it's it's a fake Sting. It's a fake Sting. It's the first time they pulled the fake Sting move.
Yeah.
And it's very clearly Barry Windham. They got Barry Windham to cut his hair like Sting, and Sid pins him, and then they're like, Sid won, and then Sting comes out. It's
wait a minute, you pinned the wrong Sting.
Yeah, and then Sting does win. It's a complete the match is fine, but just Ole had totally lost his fastball by that point as Booker. Yeah. It's just weird, which is so crazy to me that they actually recycled this fake Sting gimmick 6 years later to a much more effective degree.
Yeah, it was something that every company Sting worked for except for WWE. They just kept going back to it. TNA did it, WCW did it a bunch, TNA did it a bunch, AEW's done it a couple of times. So yeah, it's just one of those things that just continues to work. But he was earmarked to be a headliner, but WWF comes calling. They offered him a bunch of money, and then he debuts, as you had mentioned, at SummerSlam 91. And one thing I remember about that match was he was the referee. He's in there with Hogan and Warrior, two of the biggest stars in all of pro wrestling. Hogan being the biggest star, at that point, biggest, of the last 25 years. And he's also in there with Sergeant Slaughter and the Iron Sheik. and he fits in with all those guys. Like there's a bunch of big stars in that ring, and he does not look like he's out of place. He looks like he absolutely belongs. And I just remember I was like, wow, this guy's gonna be a big star. But then at Royal Rumble 1992, he turns on Hogan, gets cheered, right? Like Hogan. Well, here's the thing though.
Hogan's a dick.
Hogan was a dick in that moment. He eliminates Hogan, and then Hogan's the one that turned heel, and like he pulled Sid out of the ring after that, and then that's what started the feud. And so no wonder everybody was cheering Sid. Hogan was the actual one being a dick.
Well, here's the thing too, is like at that point, the houses are going down. Wrestling had been hot for about a good 8 years. And 91 is kind of like the last good year of the WWE, the WWF golden era, right? Sid actually, so let's not forget the part 2 of that SummerSlam main event is Savage and Elizabeth's wedding. And that's also capped by, the wedding reception where Jake officially goes all the way heel with the Cobra. And Sid comes out and saves the day.
Yeah.
Like Sid's the one who saves Savage and Elizabeth. So Sid's first program in the company is he takes Warrior's spot. Because remember, Warrior and Jake had been building up this feud for months. Jake was going to take him to the dark side. Do you remember these little vignettes? Corny as hell, fun to watch.
Yeah.
These Jake Roberts Ultimate Warrior batshit promos. They're on YouTube, guys. Trust me, look them up. They're amazing. But Warrior bounces, like Warrior gets fired, and Sid steps right into that role. So he's basically headlining immediately with Hogan, and then immediately with Jake Roberts. And like he's over, but then he's Sid. I think that's when he got hurt. I think he punctured a lung or something like that. Because Sid is super injury prone too.
Yeah. He headlines WrestleMania 8 with Hogan. So Sid was so over they put him in the match with Hogan.
I actually meant before the Rumble. He got hurt.
Before the Rumble. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Yeah. I jumped ahead. No, go ahead.
No, so he gets hurt before the Rumble and then comes back for the Rumble. And then people have been getting sick of Hogan.
Yeah.
Like it's hard to be on top for 8 years and stay hot. Like the audience had just grown tired of Hulk Hogan. And like they wanted Sid, and they chose, just like what happened with Michaels 4 years after, they chose Sid over Hogan. And Vince, in classic Vinceness, tried to erase this from happening. Like they re-edited the end of the Royal Rumble to take out the boos, for Hogan. It's just classic level of Vince lunacy. And they have Hogan and Sid at WrestleMania as the main event. And what a shit show that was.
Yeah, so the original main event of WrestleMania 8 was Hogan and Flair. They actually had started like they actually had some posters made of it. Like that was the original plan, but they felt like Flair couldn't draw, and I don't know, maybe they were right about that. They tried the match on house shows, but
so they didn't build it on TV. They did nothing to hype it up, and they stuck Flair and Hogan without a proper build, and they said, "See, you can't draw." That's Vince just being like self-fulfilling prophecy. See, Crockett guy can't draw here.
Well, he knew what he wanted. He wanted Hogan and Sid, so he had to prove his creative team, like Pat Patterson and Pritchard and those guys, wrong. So he throws them. I think they headlined in Oakland. Like they did a match in Oakland, which is not it's not exactly a wrestling town, Oakland.
No.
But so anyway, they ended up going with Hogan and Sid. They turned Sid heel after Hogan eliminates him from the Royal Rumble. The match stunk, ended in a disqualification. The Warrior returned, and Papa Shango interfered at some point. And before the match even gets started, Sid fails a drug test, but they allow the match to continue. They send him out on the European tour, and he's supposed to serve his suspension, but instead he just goes and plays softball in true Sid fashion. So he was a legend like that. And then I think he ended up. I think he might have done a match or two that summer, but he ended up not coming back to the WWE until 1995, I think. But a year later, he ends up having some injuries and stuff, and he goes back to WCW, which is the 93 run that we had just talked about.
Mm-hmm. He's gone for a good year. I don't think he resurfaced in USWA in between. I think he just shows up, because I remember watching Slamboree 93, because I think somebody has a mystery opponent. I can't remember who. And then all of a sudden,
Van Hammer.
That's who it was.
Yeah, and Colonel Rob Parker showed up. Yeah,
this giant dong showed up and announced. So I remember watching this because we had my buddy had the black market cable box, so we were over watching Slamboree, and I jumped. He didn't know who Sid Vicious was, and I'm like, "That's Sid Vicious, Sid Justice, he's back!" And I got super excited because I'm a nerd.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that didn't work out because Sid stabbed Arn Anderson.
Yeah, so he's actually like a top guy from the moment he comes back. He headlines again Halloween Havoc 93 with Sting. He ends up turning babyface. He's supposed to get the match with Vader at Starrcade 93, but he's on an overseas tour. Him and Arn Anderson gets into it. At some point, I think Arn Anderson introduces scissors into the fight. Sid grabs him and then stabs him multiple times in an attempted murder. He legit attempts murder on Arn. And then rightfully gets fired. And then I think he bounced like at that's the point where he kind of bounced around. I think he does some indie shots and
USWA.
Yeah, he went back to Memphis for a little bit, and then he ends up getting signed back to WWF because even though you've got an attempted murder in your resume, like if you're a star like Sid, you're 6'9", 300 pounds, you look the way he does and can get over the way he can, you get more chances than other people. And so they brought him right back.
But it's like a good, because Sid shows up on the WrestleMania at the Raw after the first ever Raw after Mania in 95. And he got fired in like October, November of 93. So Sid's out of the main company for a good long time. And it made sense too, because Shawn was feuding with Nash. And Shawn needed a new heavy, and like who better than Sid, right? It actually made a lot of sense. So booking wise, it clicked. But think about that. Sid tried to kill Arn Anderson, and like nothing happened. Like he stabbed the man repeatedly.
Wrestlers, old school. I'll say old school wrestlers. They don't even snitch when someone tries to kill you. Like they're not going to.
But everybody, dude, I learned about this in Pro Wrestling Illustrated. It wasn't like it was a dark secret of the wrestling world.
Yeah.
Like,
well, I mean, I guess the authorities could have tried to do something, but I don't think Arn would have, went with it.
It's wild to me. Yeah, Arn got
stabbed. They ended up doing business later.
I know. Like, which just goes to show you how much Arn Anderson loves wrestling. That he's like, that man stabbed me. Yeah, I can make money with him.
Yeah. Like, I bet if you were to like pull Arn to the side, like at a bar or something, and be like, why would you do business with Sid after that? And he's probably like, well, damn, son, I brought the scissors and they paid me money,
My fault for bringing him in the first place. Yeah, I can
bring scissors, don't you? You're probably gonna get your ass whooped. He's 6'9", shit.
Which is funny because Brian Pillman beat his ass with a squeegee. Like, I mean, like these wrestling stories are just awesome.
Yeah. But yeah, he comes back. He ends up obviously it was over like crazy. He has several injuries, but at the Survivor Series 1996, he ends up he replaces Vader, which is weird because he had replaced he had gotten replaced by Flair for his match against Vader. Then years later, Shawn Michaels doesn't want to work with Vader because Vader's too stiff for old Shawn boy for the old heartbreak. And so he's like, well, I want to work with Sid, who also he didn't exactly have a reputation for working light. People didn't like to take that power bomb, but he probably was pretty nice to Shawn with that power bomb.
Yeah, I mean, Shawn and Sid, I think, got along because they were friends together for a while. So I mean, I think Shawn is cool, dude. Nobody wanted to work with Vader. Hogan was scared of Vader too. Like Vader had this reputation of killing people because Vader would beat the shit out of people.
Yeah, but he ends up winning the title there, and then he loses it back to Shawn at the Royal Rumble because he was always pretty much a transition champion type of guy at that point because everybody felt like he's either going to get hurt or he's just going to quit, which is kind of what which is what he did. So here let's just go back to he loses the title back to the Royal to Shawn Michaels at the Royal Rumble 1997 Alamo Dome. Then Shawn lost his smile immediately after he vacated it. Bret Hart ends up winning the vacated title in your house in February in a 4-way against Vader, Undertaker, and Steve Austin. And then the next night, immediately the next night, Bret lost the title to Sid. And then Sid loses the title to the Undertaker, the main event of WrestleMania 13. He suffered a neck and back injuries that year. And then he ends up getting released that summer. And then he's just gone for a little bit again after that.
Well, he's in that big accident with Furnace and LaFon. Like, there's a major car accident with those guys, and Sid's legit fucked up from it. Like, so were Furnace and LaFon. Like, those guys were lucky not to die in that car accident. So I mean, like Sid was kind of injury prone, but I mean that's not I don't remember the history of the actual accident itself, but I don't think you can blame Sid for the car accident. So
no. He like I said, he had some injuries. He got released that summer, and then the following year he doesn't return until 1998, and he actually pops up in ECW.
Mhm.
And he was kind of doing the 911 gimmick where he was just showing up and power bombing people. And I remember that like very fondly. It was pretty fucking. I was a big ECW guy at the time, and just watching him come in and choke slam and power bomb dudes. Like he debuted, and I remember he debuted. I think Judge Jeff Jones was his manager, and he comes in, and then John Cronus is standing in the ring, and he comes out and he just choke slams Cronus over the top rope to the floor through a table, and the shit just exploded. Yeah, that was pretty cool. And then he ends up making it back over to WCW. He obviously he ends up winning the world title after Chris Benoit vacated the belt when he went to WWE. So he ends up beating Nash for the title, and then Nash strips him of the title because he's the booker, and then he beats Nash for the title again. And then but he was a WCW champ. He was the WWF champ on a couple of occasions. He ends up breaking his leg in January of 2001, and that was pretty much it for Sid, man. But it was a great career.
Wrestling Scott Steiner for the title, I believe.
Yeah, he comes off. It was WCW Sin. I think they main evented Starrcade, so he had like a lot of main event pay-per-views, like the 2 WrestleManias, a Royal Rumble, 2 Halloween Havocs. He had a couple of Starrcades, I think.
He was main eventer.
Yeah. And then he was wrestling Scott Steiner. He's coming off the top rope or the middle rope with trying to do a kick where he lands on one leg and he's kicking Scotty with the other one, and he just snaps underneath him.
It wasn't he trying to do like, he always did like the Kevin Nash Bigfoot where like they come in and he would just kind of, split and kick him high. He had, in his mind, he thought that he could jump off the middle rope, kick him in the face, and stick the landing. It turns out, and he had kind of small legs to begin with for a bodybuilder, and like that thing just went snapola.
Yeah, it was one of the grossest things. It was like, that you mentioned Joe Theismann, Alex Smith from the Redskins as well. He had the same thing. And then I was thinking of Robin Ventura when he was sliding. I think he was sliding into third Chicago White Sox. I'm sure you remember that.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah, it was one of the more gruesome like wrestling injuries I've ever seen. But yeah, that was it for him, man. But I just wanted to give I wanted to do justice for old Sid Justice, because we typically we don't do too much on our obituaries, but I feel like you and I were big enough fans that we wanted to dedicate some time to Sycho Sid.
I think that we appreciate him. I don't think you and me aren't gonna like. I don't believe in guilty pleasures. I think you like what you like. Like I like yacht rock. God damn it! Like Hall and Oates are great. Like, so I have no qualm saying yes. I liked Sid Vicious. I didn't like him ironically. I liked Sid Vicious. He was fun.
Yeah, he was fun. Let's go to the chat real quick. We have some people that are wanting to talk about Sid. Io says put Sid in the Hall of Fame. Yeah, I mean, I'm surprised he's not in it. But maybe he's got heat. I don't know. But I think he'll go in now. I think there's so many tributes are coming down. Everybody's like have fond memories of him. I think that he'll come in now. Jan says, I checked. Sid was a multiple-time world champion and main eventer, yet is not in the Hall of Fame yet. Coco Beware is. Look, WWE Hall of Fame is not real. It's a fake Hall of Fame. They do it based on demographic and who they can get in at the time and who they're able to book. And they just never put them in. There's no rhyme or reason to it. It doesn't matter if you're a big star or not. Vince's limo driver's in the Hall of Fame.
Mm-hmm. Vince's dad's limo drivers in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Like, you got to understand this, guys. The WWE Hall of Fame is not real. Like Mike says, the closest thing to a wrestling Hall of Fame that we really have is the Tragos Thez one in Iowa. That's the closest thing to a real Hall of Fame because it's an actual physical building. The Observer Hall of Fame is probably more prestigious, but I mean, like, we have to stop thinking about the WWE Hall of Fame as being legitimate.
Yeah, it's just another show. Just another show. Dobby says Sid rules the world. Yeah. Sid and Mean Mark were both CWA Memphis 1989. Yeah. A lot of guys came through Memphis, man. So
everybody.
Yeah, everybody like a lot of your favorites were big. He won the title thanks to Steve. So yeah, when he was wrestling Bret, Steve Austin interfered. Bret had him Sid in the sharpshooter. Like go back and watch that Raw match from '97. I watched it. Sid's selling his ass off for Bret. He's making like, I know Bret made Sid look great, but watch how Sid's selling for Bret. He makes Bret look great because Bret is like 6 inches shorter and he's still able to make it look like Bret could kick his ass. You know what I mean? Like that, there's a talent there.
He sold for Benoit too. When Benoit beat him for the vacant title in 2000, like I know we don't like to praise Chris Benoit, but Sid made Benoit look great too.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, rest in peace, Psycho Sid.